A young man recently wrote me asking for help, saying, "I feel directionless and intimidated. I don't even know where to start." Since it resonated with me, since it reminded me of my beginnings as an artist, and because I thought it could be beneficial to others, I decided to make a video dealing with this issue and suggesting practical things everyone can do to have a good start. Welcome to Beyond How to Paint. In this new series of videos, the main idea is that technique is useless without inspiration, and inspiration is helpless without technique. So we'll try to bring the two together. We'll start by getting rid of the creative block, and then move on to practical things you can do today to make great art tomorrow. Today, for the first episode, we will talk about the sense of being lost, directionless, and intimidating by a creative task. It's way more common than you think, and successfully dealing with this feeling is crucial. Technique is, of course, extremely important for art, but it's not enough, unfortunately. One also needs inspiration. So, the idea of this video is that the first part is going to focus on inspiration, and the second part will be more practical, and I'll try to suggest things you can start doing today. If you're only interested in learning about the technique I'll be using for the painting in the background, this is not what this video is going to be about. I cover technique in depth on my YouTube channel, and also, of course, in the 2 painting courses you can find on my website. You'll find all the links in the description. In the background, you will see me paint a master copy of a self-portrait by Caravaggio. You will understand the reason behind this choice later. You'll see that I didn't choose this artist randomly. During this episode, you'll see the painting process in the background, but I will not be commenting what I do. However, you can watch the full technical version with commentary by joining my Patreon community, and you'll also find all the links in the description. Alright, let's go back to our subject. I don't even know where to start. This really sounds familiar. I often receive this type of message. People usually thank me for all the tutorials, but still tell me that even with all the content available online, they feel somehow overwhelmed. And it's not necessarily the first time they try art, because as a complete beginner you can understand the feeling of being intimidated. But it doesn't necessarily need to be people that are just starting. Sometimes people just feel lost and intimidated. And the weirdest thing is that this fear is not only something you face just once in the beginning. A creative journey is a permanent revolution. As an artist, you are constantly reinventing yourself, and over the years you'll have many new beginnings. Every time you discover something new, you have to think as if you were starting over. So you'll probably face this type of problem many times. But every time the feeling is the same. Feeling intimidated, feeling overwhelmed. It's like being at the foot of a mountain and thinking that the summit is way too high, that you'll never make it. The task sure looks enormous when you're just starting, and to be fair, it is. I'm not going to say that painting is easy and that you can just blame yourself for being afraid, because I would be lying and it doesn't help anybody. Painting can be easy, but it can also be extremely difficult. It does require an enormous amount of effort and concentration. And in this situation you will hear advice that has good intentions, but is actually terrible, like just start. Or maybe more sophisticated, the journey of 1,000 miles, start with a simple step. Alright, it's true. It's very true, but it's actually so true that it doesn't really help, because it applies to everything with no distinction. It's a truism. It's not relevant for a given situation, It's just true in general. And you could say, okay, the journey of 1,000 miles starts with a simple step, but in which direction? Ultimately, advice like just start is the same as blaming the person for not being as brave as you, like saying, well, I have succeeded in confronting my fears, so just do the same, just be brave like me and stop complaining. So I hope you see that just start is not helping. So let's put this kind of recommendation on the side and talk about art. How do you begin this creative journey? The problem of feeling intimidated is that you look at the technique other artists use and think that it will take way too much work and effort to get there. And the fear behind this nervous feeling is that you're not sure it will even be worth it. How can you be sure that the complicated techniques you're about to learn will prove to be what you need for your art? Actually, this person who wrote me also added, it's scary to think that I need to go all the way back to the beginning, and scarier to imagine that I might waste time doing so in a wrong way. It describes everything: the fear of facing new beginnings, the fear of starting a journey in the wrong direction. Indeed, there are so many techniques, so many approaches. One instructor will tell you one thing and the next one the contrary. Let's face it, art education is very confusing. Even the clearest instructions can unveil an entire world of questions. So, if you find yourself in this situation, I'll give you one of the most important advice I can think of. Don't start with technique, start with intentions. Let me say it again. Don't start with technique, start with intentions. If you ever want to start a journey, I'm sure you'll not start just by walking. You'll start by finding a destination and visualizing the path. If I put a bow and arrow in your hands, I sure hope that you won't start by shooting, and that you'll start by aiming to make sure that you hit the right target. So let me clarify what I have in mind when I say start with intentions and not technique. You need to visualize the kind of art you want to make before you start trying to learn art. Because it's not the same to learn landscape or portrait, watercolor or oil painting. Learning the technique before you know what to do with it is a big mistake. Some people actually use technique to hide the fact that they don't know what kind of art they want to make. They feel lost, they feel directionless, but still, they use technique to hide this feeling. So they become obsessed with technique, they become overly focused on the right way to paint. Even I often get schooled on art techniques by random people who debate on art products as if their life depended on it. They feel somehow, offended that you don't paint like they do, or like this other YouTuber suggested, or use this product that they found in this random book or website. It's borderline insane. It makes you wonder what they really want to hide. It's not rare to see technical debates among amateur painters, and very often those who argue the most vehemently make very empty art. And by empty, I mean art with no soul, no idea, no inspiration. Thanks for the meaningless debate, but I'll pass. I don't care about liquid or marauder or medium. I'll pass. Whatever technique or product helps me create what I want to create is fine with me, as long as it helps me express my idea as I intended it. If you think that I always use the same techniques, the same products, think again. I just go with whatever feels best for each project. And you need to be fluent like this. This is why, when it comes to teaching techniques, I always give multiple options with the benefits and inconvenience, and I tell people to decide. It's their responsibility to decide which technique is the best for them. The thing is, you will have all the time in the world to figure out how to do things, but first, you need to know what to do. What you want to paint will tell you how it can be painted. Now, this is important. Let me say that again. What you want to paint will tell you how it can be painted, or at least it will point to what you need to learn to do so. So, start with intentions. What does that mean? As far as things you can paint go, there's an infinite number of possibilities. You first need to start filtering. What do you want in your art, and what will you put aside? Are you interested in faces, bodies, color and light, animals, landscape, symbols, abstraction? Then filter again. If you're more specifically interested in faces, try to be more specific. Do you want to paint realistic portraits, imaginary characters, faces with idealized beauty, or maybe a very stylized approach? Now, you might think that filtering subjects like this is restrictive, but we are talking about getting rid of a feeling of being directionless. Remember that we started with this testimony, this story from this young man saying how intimidated he felt. If you feel like this, the best approach is not to tackle everything at once, but to be very selective and specific. You will make the learning process much more efficient. Indeed, if you want to draw stylized characters from imagination, you don't necessarily need the set of skills that you would need for realistic portraits. And it would be very demoralizing to learn the complicated techniques required to paint realistic portraits and realizing too late that actually you prefer to paint stylized imaginary characters. It's not that the skills required for portraits are not helpful, it's just that the risk of giving up at the first failure is very high if your intentions and the techniques you try to learn don't line up. Secondly, it's not as restrictive as you think. It's just a matter of priority. If you want to learn everything, fine, you can. But you have to start somewhere, do you? You have to prioritize. So, whether you want it or not, there will be a hierarchy between the things you try to learn. And my idea is that you need to be aware of this hierarchy and start with the most important techniques required for the art that you visualize in your head. Now, practically speaking, how can you figure this out? Once you have selected what you want or don't want in your paintings, what can you do? What can you start doing today to learn the right techniques tomorrow? How can you start this incredibly complex journey? What I'm going to suggest to you is nothing new, and that's how art has more or less been taught since forever. Find your master, and by that I mean your inspirational master. There is an artist, past or present, who has influenced your vision of art more than any other. This is your master, figuratively, of course, because your inspirational master can't be there to teach you how to paint, but still, the art this master has produced has had such an impact on you that it has somehow shaped your vision of art. Of course, many artists may have shaped your vision of art, and most of the time, people don't try to find which one had the most influence and why. And when I say influence, I'm talking about ideas and reflections about what great art should be like. It doesn't need to be a pretentious, foolish belief that you will paint just like the greatest masters of the past. It's an influence. It's a direction. If you start your artistic journey in this direction, you will somehow get closer to what you like the most about art. See? We're talking about direction here, and we are slowly dealing with the feeling of being directionless. At least, if you know what you like about art, you'll have a better idea of the techniques you need to learn to get there. Here's what you can do, and you can start now. Take a piece of paper and make a list of 5 artists that you love. Your absolute top 5. And at the top, your number 1, your master. Don't be afraid to pick the greatest of all time. We're not pretending that we'll ever reach their level. It's just to find influence and direction. So don't hesitate to aim high. They can also be very different from each other. It doesn't matter. Just find 5 artists that you love. Then, for each artist, try to describe with a couple of words what you like in their work. The colors, the faces, the figures, the shadows, whatever moves you. Now, and this is the most crucial part, the third part is to find for each artist a skill that you would need to learn to get closer to what you like in their work. What would you need to work on so that you get closer to this ideal representation? I'm going to give you my list, and you've surely understood why I chose to copy a self-portrait by Caravaggio in the background, but let me give you my list. Number 5 is Edgar Degas. What I love about Degas is his use of color harmony. The skill I think I should work on in relation to Degas is combining original hue harmony using variety in value and chroma. Number 4 is Raphael. What I like about Raphael is the ideal beauty of his faces. So what I need to do is reach a high level of accuracy in portraits. Number 3 is Da Vinci. What I like about Da Vinci is how he combines sharpness of drawing and softness of painting. And the skill involved here is practice linear drawing as well as shading with paint. Number 2, Waterhouse. What I like about Waterhouse is his use of symbolism in storytelling. And what I need to do is learn about symbols and include them in my compositions. And the number 1, you guessed it, is Caravaggio, which is why I decided to paint him in the background. It's hard to explain exactly what I like about his work because I love so many aspects, but I definitely feel attracted to the powerful compositions and expressive storytelling through chiaroscuro. Now, when I was exploring the work of Caravaggio as a beginner, I discovered that he didn't start with a cartoon like many of the masters of the Renaissance. We haven't found any relevant drawings from him, so he probably just started with paint on the canvas, directly, with very little preparation. How has this affected my own approach? Well, I've always felt that there was something special in the spontaneity of painting without an outline. You can let the emotions flow on the canvas. So, as a beginner, I decided that somehow the ultimate goal of my artistic journey should be to be capable of painting a portrait directly with paint without the need of any preparatory drawing. And if you rewind this video, you'll see that how I started is exactly what I'm talking about. Now, just because I recognized the influence didn't make the learning process easier. In fact, it took me years to really become capable of starting with paint, and there was a lot of intermediate steps that I first needed to take to get there. But at least, even if the journey was long and difficult, I always had this long-term objective in mind, sort of like a beacon of light in the middle of the night. I had to make my own way forward, and this idea, this influence was always here, far, far away, but guiding me. That's why I told you to start with intentions and not technique. We all need to make our own way. The path that I've chosen might not be the right one for you, depending on where you need to go. But knowing where you want to go ultimately will tell you how to get there. Let me take my own example one more time. To become capable of painting a portrait without a preparatory drawing, I knew that first I needed to become capable of drawing a portrait accurately with charcoal. And to do that, I needed to draw a portrait accurately with a pencil. And to do that, I first needed to be capable of drawing a set of simple shapes accurately with a pencil, and so on. So I made an imaginary checklist of all the skills and exercises that I could do in order to make the art that I wanted to make ultimately. So at the top of the list was the most difficult task I had in mind, and all the way down, the easiest things, the one that were at my level, the exercise that I could start with at the level that I was at this point as a beginner. It's like a pyramid. At the top, the highest goal, the ideal vision of your art, but you can't reach it immediately. You have to climb up there, one step at a time. Each step leading to the top is an intermediate goal you need to reach to get closer to your ultimate goal. That's why I said that what you want to paint will tell you how to paint it. To paint like this, you first need to learn all these different skills, and this is actually where you start. Now, I know that this entire explanation will sound silly if you've got everything figured out already, but a lot more people than you think feel kind of lost with what they are supposed to draw creatively. It's a mistake to think that a creative person is always up to something, always with a new idea and always has a new project in mind. It's actually a lot more complicated than most people think. The creative block is very real, and this feeling of being directionless is actually shared by many. For a creative person, not being busy doing something creative is a real pain, and being stuck is one of the most difficult things for a creative person. The worst thing about this is that you can face this feeling multiple times in your creative journey, and not just in the beginning. As I said, as a creative person, you are constantly trying to reinvent yourself. A creative brain is always looking for ways to think outside the box, but once you're outside the box, you're directionless in the night and nobody can show you the way. So please don't underestimate the feeling of being directionless. If you want to share your own story, your beginnings, don't hesitate to use the comment section below. If you want to see the technical version of this painting, it's available for my Patreon members. And if you like this type of content, you can support my work by purchasing one of my painting courses, links in the description, or joining my Patreon community, and you'll have access to all the exclusive content and real-time commentary of my paintings. Thank you very much for watching this first episode of Beyond How to Paint. If you want to suggest topics for the next episode, leave a comment below. I'll see you for the next one, and remember, technique is useless without inspiration, and inspiration is helpless without technique. As always, have fun painting.